Welcome back to the big issue, discussing the state of the economy, the way forward, analyzing what the steps governments are taking, whether these are the right steps that gets us out of the situation we find ourselves in. And I'm doing this conversation this morning with Dr. Edu Susako. He's joined us via Zoom. He's a lecturer at the Economics Department of the University of Ghana. Franklin Kujo, president of Imani Africa. Toma Mihia, he's a financial journalist. And Professor Ebu Texan, also from the University of Ghana. He's the coordinator for the Economic Policy Management Program. And he's the one I am coming to now. And Prof, just before Prof speaks, again, messages 0549 986 996, 0550 585832, 0549 986 996, and 0550 585832. I'll gladly read your messages. This goes to both radio and for those of you who are watching us on television. So, Prof, we know what the problems are. It seems like it's pouring right now on these governments. They can't seem to buy any room to maneuver. They are trying to. What do you make of the steps that they are taking? Are they making the right moves to try and extricate themselves? Are you convinced by some of the things that you have heard the finance minister say, some of the moves being made to find room to improve the economy?
Thank you, Godfred, and good morning to your viewers and those who are listening on radio. Before I answer that question, let me also say a few things regarding the state of our economy now and how we got here.
Okay, go ahead.
And for me, the big take is, what was the picture at the beginning of 2020? Very important. I mean, over a period of 5 years, from 2015 to 2020, we had gone through a reform program. It ended somewhere April of 2019. And I'll read a statement from the IMF vice president on the Ghanaian economy. And let me quote.
Year?
Pardon?
From which year?
2019.
Okay.
And let me quote. The authorities have achieved significant macro gains throughout the ECF supported program, with rising growth, single-digit inflation, fiscal consolidation, and banking sector cleanup. The continued macroeconomic adjustment should underpin these improvements as the 2020 elections approach. Now, this shows clearly that by the end of 2019, especially when the budget was read in November 2019, our expectation was a Ghanaian economy that was on the right track. Mm-hmm. All the macro indicators show clearly the gains we had made in terms of inflation, the growth of the economy, agriculture, industry, sector growth outpacing services, which is the structural transformation that we have to see. We are seeing our exchange rate relatively more stable. And interest rates, most importantly, had dropped. So far as Ghana was concerned, by the time the pandemic hit Ghana, we were on the right track. And there was no doubt about this. I remember I shared platforms with the former Minister of Finance, and he said, look, you guys give me some of the credit because I started the reforms. So we are all very certain that Ghana was on the right track. And then COVID hit. I wouldn't say that our current situation is all because of COVID, because there are still structural bottlenecks that we've not solved. And when we don't do that, some of these short-term measures will bring some gains, but they would not hold for a long time. Because when there are even external factors that are out of our control that hit us, then we begin reeling, and then we find out that, look, we've even gotten there. But COVID was a different ballgame altogether. Unlike other external factors that hit, COVID, like my colleague Sarkodie did say, dealt Ghana and many other countries in this world a severe blow. We have been fortunate to have grown in 2020, unlike most countries that went into a recession. But what was important was that it came hitting us back with our domestic resource mobilization. I remember in 2018, 2019, the reversal of those initiatives like taxing the cars with higher kind capacity and increasing the threshold for taxes for the high income earners being reversed was bad. We should have continued that because it was also generatory revenue, and secondly, it was targeted at the very wealthy in the society, which is good. Nobody knows what happened, and then it was reversed. At that time, some of us were saying, look, let us pursue property rates. Because you see, once Ghana became a low middle income country and we moved into the ICM, international capital markets, there was going to come a time that if we don't do anything about domestic resource mobilization, we're going to get to where we are now. It so happened sooner than later because of COVID. Because you need to raise at least between 20 and 25% of GDP as your domestic revenue to be very comfortable like a country like Ghana, so that we rely less on the international capital markets. In the worst case scenario, if you want to fund our deficit, we can try and look at within domestic sources to fund it, even though it has implications for the private sector. But when interest rates have dropped so low, you can use that as an excuse to still borrow from the domestic market because it doesn't really have a greater impact on interest rate. But that is not what we've done. And so you could see clearly that COVID has opened up the wounds that we have tried to conceal as the economy was looking like it was doing well. I don't, for any moment, envy the position of the finance minister because when I listen to the sort of criticisms and the number of suggestions that are coming across, I ask, how feasible are some of these suggestions? I mean, you are in an economy where you want to collect taxes and it's a big deal. You are in an economy where you have an overbearing executive size and a democracy which is very expensive. I'm not saying democracy is not good, but do we have the finances to fund that huge size of, especially our parliament? I've been saying this over time. Do we need 270 members of parliament? These are statutory payments that leave our budget. Like Sarkozy said, yes, you can reduce it, but you cannot touch some of them. Yes, but we still can reduce it. Do we need 100? Do we need more than 100 members of parliament? Why don't we allow the local government system, where the district executives are the agents of development, and leave our lawmakers, 100 of them, to sit in parliament and make laws, pass laws, check on government, and so on and so forth, rather than even have a huge size of parliament and even contemplating increasing the number of parliamentarians. It comes with a huge cost to Ghana. So it's the structural problem that we have that we fail to deal with that has brought us to this point. Obviously, like Franklin said, the current managers of the economy know what they have to do. The choices are difficult choices, but Ghanaians are also reeling under a high cost of living, which is also part of the effect of the pandemic all over the world. I mean, countries like the US and other places is even worse. We are fortunate that before the pandemic, our inflation was single digits. So it's moved in just above we are now talking about 13.9%. And hopefully, if all goes well in terms of food production, we should see it tone down a little bit. Of course, with efficient management of the monetary side by the central bank. But what is critical for us now is the choice of whether we need to pay more taxes. Because, you see, if the domestic resource mobilization is not enough, and like Sarkozy said, we will have to be sacrificing capital expenditure, which it is supposed to be the ingredient that should expand the economy. And that is not what we should be sacrificing. But if we push the government to the wall, then that will be the first thing that they are going to sacrifice. Because like you said, you cannot touch compensation to employees unless you reduce the size of your government. You cannot touch the statutory payments. As for interest payments,
you cannot do anything about
obligations that we need to meet. So we need to come to a realization that we need to improve our resource mobilization. And like my colleague here said, we need to look at property rates. We need to take a look at other alternatives that you can raise taxes. I support the E-Levy in one area, because I've said it over that I do not support taxing payments. I do not support taxing savings. Movement of Momo, no. But I support a government that will use a right infrastructure to tax those who are doing online e-commerce and out of the purview of the Ghana Revenue Agency. There are a lot of people who have closed down their shops. They have their staff at home. They are advertising online, sending delivery men to go and they are receiving more payments
We heard the GRA this week say that is something they are going to deal with heavily
precisely
in April.
And that is an electronic transaction levy. So the way we are bastardizing the e-levy because of the MOMO, it will make it very difficult for Ghanaians to accept what an electronic transaction levy should do to the Ghanaian economy. Because as technology is improving and digitization is becoming the norm, a lot of people will no longer have to rent their shops and pay those huge amount of money to landlords. They'll pack their things at home in a store at home, advertise online, have delivery men park in front of their houses, and they are delivering. And we see that happening every time. The Ghana Revenue Agency should be equipped with the infrastructure that will allow them to pursue those online e-commerce transactions for us to collect the taxes. And it's not going to be a 1.5% thing, at least 3%. So I think that the focus of government should go to that direction. I do not support a mobile transactions levy. I mean, I do not. But I also support an e-levy that is also going to target, and this is why I disagree slightly with Toma, right? Yeah. And this is why I disagree. There are a lot of artisans in this country, in the informal sector, who make incomes more than I do as a university lecturer. And these guys or ladies are working and charging for their services huge amounts of money. Look, apart from the real estate agencies that are more formalized, most of the real estate that you find all over this world, personal houses and all of that, are built by these artisans, charging tens of thousands, being paid by Momo, being paid fiscal cash. They don't pay taxes. And so if we can find a way, and you see, it has also to do with how effective our civic education is sensitizing Ghanaians on their obligations as responsible citizens. So for instance, if I'm paying an artisan, I should be able to indicate to the telcos that this money that I'm sending to Godfred is for his services as a mason. The telco should have an infrastructure that will say that so far as the description is services to the mason, then the withholding tax will be deducted by the telcos and sent to government. Government can link with the telcos to do this. But it will be our responsibility for making those payments to indicate in the description that this is payment for these personal services so that the revenue agencies can collect those taxes. So there are alternatives that we can, and we should all be responsible to our civic obligations to see to it that people do not live in this country, collect huge sums of money, and they don't pay any tax. So that it's only the formal sector workers who are being taxed over and over. So if we think that other taxes are being pushed on us, we have to also help the government, with the government linked with the telcos, to find out the description for those more transactions. And if we are truthful, and there is a way that we can detect cheating and punish, then we'll get people to do the right thing. And these are ways in which we can collect domestic resources. So it's important that we equip the Ghana revenue agencies. Then I move to the expenditure side. And I've said it in another way. Yes, we cannot cut down certain expenditures, but we can rationalize our expenditure. Look at the amount of money that we waste to corruption for the Public Accounts Committee. The sort of procurement system that we are running, which should have been to the benefit of Ghana, I don't think it is. We need to find a way in which we can efficiently ensure that there's value for money audit for all government goods and services that are procured, especially in the public sector, so that the wastage in that system, like Bernard said, will be brought down. Because that, when you save any expenditure, it's like you have collected more revenue. So instead of looking at taxes, we can also take a look at that. And I was happy when the finance minister said, look, we've reduced our expenditure by 20% for this year. It is just to show to the investors on the ICM that Ghana is doing something about fiscal consolidation, because all these ratings by the rating agencies is the expectation that we might not be able to meet our budget deficit of 7.4. And therefore, if you are going to give money, if you are going to buy government debt now, know that their deficit might be double digits, and therefore they'll find it very difficult to repay you. So if you are going to give money, then go for a high interest rate. That is all that the ratings is saying. But if government can give credible commitment to to meeting the fiscal deficit target for 2022. I think that the assurance that will go to the investors will enable government to borrow cheaper. And that is what we need now. So I was excited, one, for the fact that the government said, look, we are cutting down the cap for expenditure by 20%. The Vice President announced that those who have to make essential travels on behalf of government will be given a card to track their expenses. But what is important is for us to show leadership in this country, like Bernard said, where we have a situation where members of parliament, the executive, come to say, look, these are hard times. Yes, we needed the E-Levy to close a gap. But if you don't trust us, we are ceding 15% of our salaries to save government some extra money. So that the goodwill that will come with would even make Ghanaians more successful to the fact that, okay, if there's going to be an E-Levy, it's going to be at 0.75 or 1%. Government is also doing something. We are going to go.
So we meet each other halfway.
Precisely, and then we meet ourselves halfway. That, I think, should be something that the Minister of Finance, the government should be looking at. But most importantly, I know this is going to come at a discomfort to the President, but like the Finance Minister said, we should look at the free education financing again.
It's interesting how he came out, the Finance Minister, quite early in the proposal for free senior high school to say, and he said it publicly because he said it to Bernard here, that this might not be the best thing we have done.
Precisely. We have said it since the free SHS started that, look, there's a way in which we can target. You see, a subsidy is a negative tax. So if you want Ghanaians to pay more taxes, then take away the subsidy from those who can afford and not necessarily give them the freebies and go and tax, and the same people are complaining. So what we can do as a country, look, these kids come from schools to the next level. So I take my child to GIS, to these private schools, paying so much money. My child goes to secondary school and it's supposed to be for free. I have the ability to pay the 1,050 cedis that boarding students pay for a whole year. I can pay that money because I'm paying maybe $3,000, $4,000. Not even dollars, cedis per term. For 3 terms, I'm paying about 12,000. I don't care paying 2,000 for my kids to go to the SHS for a whole year and make sure the quality of education and the fact that the government is able to give them what they need to learn in the right environment is assured. I mean, when you talk to the headmasters of the schools, they are telling you that these days it's very difficult for them to do things. And most of our secondary schools are living off the goodwill of their own students, painting their dormitories and all of that. So the concept of free SHS is one of the best policies that ever since I grew up, I've seen any government do. So the President has that mindset and the vision that every kid up to secondary school, if the parents cannot afford, the government should take up that cost. But those parents who are being given the subsidy and they don't need it, I don't think that is helping Ghana, because if these parents pay, the amount of money that will leave our revenue to fund the free SHS will decline. It frees some space for government, and government can use that freed resources to expand our capital expenditure, to expand our economy. So there's a way out. It's just that I think that the President needs to listen to this little bit of advice that our free SHS is a good policy. He's come up with, look, I'm very, very proud of this President for his vision in the free SHS and the 1D1F. The 1D1F is one of the structural bottlenecks that we've had in this country for a long time. We are too import dependent. Our import substitution industrialization and Nkrumah didn't work. Why? Because we didn't have the agricultural base to support the ISI strategy, and it failed. Now we are coming up with what the East Asian Tigers did, by the government providing the environment for the private sector to go into import substitution industrialization, giving them all the support that they require, so that they are now going to produce to substitute for the imports that we bring it in, reduce our import dependence, and even dare to export to other African countries. So we are moving through import substitution industrialization to export promotion. I think that the President should be commended for focusing on this 1D1F project. It's a good project that in the long term, Ghanaians will see the benefits. Free SHS is good, but not for everybody.
All right.
So it's important that we take a look at some of these things.
Points well made on that, Professor But Texan. explained quite a few things. I'm going to do something quickly so that we can wrap this up, so I can talk about education as well. And I want to focus on the next round. I'm going to give each of you like 5 or 6 minutes on what to do short term, because most of the solutions are also political. Prof has spoken about solutions. Most of them are political. Toma, I think you did a great job of explaining property rates, exemptions bills, and once you pay attention, you know that to get it done, it's political. Yeah. Dr. Edu Ususako there. We know E-Levy is not getting passed anytime soon. Yeah. From where I sit, there are a lot of political games being played, and at the moment the numbers just don't work in Parliament. That much I can tell you. So until the number rationalization works in Parliament, we're not getting E-Levy. So the government cannot do E-Levy now, but needs money. Franklin, we've talked about bold measures here. Minus E-Levy, property rates, political. Exemptions bill, political. Benchmark, they've said they'll do it, but they are doing it at tortoise pace again because it's political. It has...
let me say something about this benchmark. Because I heard Franklin say that. I heard... you see, it's not easy to say that, look, reverse the benchmark values.
Why?
There are very serious issues that we need to... I mean, if you do a trade analysis of our imports and our import substitution, you cannot just say, okay, take away the reversal of the benchmark values. What study has Ghana done to show? Look, both sides have a very strong argument, either to support the benchmark value reduction or to take it away.
But we've seen the numbers, Prof. It didn't make too much of a dent in revenue.
No, it didn't make too much of a dent in revenue because COVID hit. After we started this benchmark, it was going to take time for it to have an impact. There was an issue with COVID and the fact that global value chain slowed down. So we cannot make a good assessment of that policy. But for what it's worth, you ask yourself the question, supposing that we reverse the benchmark values, do our domestic industries have the capacity to produce what we don't import anymore because the prices are higher? There's a reason why the benchmark values were imposed. I don't have a problem if we are taking away some of the items in the list that we have domestic capacity to produce. Okay. But our industrialization also depends on us procuring cheaper inputs to support our industrialization drive. So we need to identify those inputs that we don't produce here and keep the benchmark values on. Because if these inputs are going to support our industrialization, it can also make our domestic firms competitive, because if they are paying taxes on these inputs and they are going to use for production and even for export, they are not going to be competitive. So we need to take a look at the list, take out those ones that we don't need a benchmark value, reduction of benchmark values on, but keep those that we need to keep there. So that whole sale policy of discarded, I don't subscribe to that.
Okay.
We've not done an assessment of the elasticity of our domestic producers. Supposing it's rice, and you say, look, take away the benchmark values, and it's taken away, rice becomes very expensive. Do our domestic producers have the capacity to meet our domestic demand for rice production? What it will end up will be for the average consumer to still consume some imported rice because the domestic producers cannot meet our demand. But now the imported rice will have a higher price because the reduction in the benchmark values have been removed. Right. So we need to do a content analysis of that and discard those that we need to discard and keep the benchmark values on the ones that we need to keep because we don't have the domestic capacity to meet the demand.
Interesting perspective there. Franklin, let me bring you in on your final take on this. Where is the wiggle room for governments now? Like I said, E-Levy, I don't think from where I sit is happening anytime soon because the numbers don't make sense yet in Parliament unless some form of consensus is reached. Prof has explained what his feelings on benchmark value, exemptions bill, property rates, cutting costs also looks like... I'm not feeling very confident right now.
Well, first of all, let me just say something about the issues that have been discussed so far. I take extreme opposition to the view that the issues concerning expenditure rationalization should be put at the back burner because there's a government that is running an expansionist regime and that government will spend anyway. I mean, this whole Keynesian thought is something that doesn't quite stick with me. Fact of the matter is that if you say the government said they were going to conduct a value for money on all projects, question we have is what has been the value for money report on the 1 million per each constituency, all this one village, one dam, even the planting for food and jobs. I think we've had occasions to talk about the nature of the subsidies that were granted, especially in the fertilizer sector, and where the fertilizer eventually were headed. So I think there's still some questions to be answered concerning why we needed to create additional 6 regions when we knew we didn't have the money to support it. It's important that these questions are answered before we even begin to look at other clear measures. But someone can say, well, that those things have already happened. The fact of the matter is that once you're not curing them, you create room for their continuous existence on our financial books. Let me just say that by way of asking the question, what can be done now? There's something else that should be done. And I think Imani and there's a British think tank we work with, where we are looking at the port operations. We managed to find out not too long ago that almost 34% of revenues essentially collected goes unaccounted for. And this is something the GRA has actually corroborated. But we've been conducting over the last couple of weeks. I've been quite busy with my team, meeting various state agencies that matter when the port revenues are concerned. We met with the Ministry of Finance, the ports authorities. If I met Yoko yesterday, we are meeting the EMT next week, just to show exactly what occurs at the ports when it comes to insider manipulation, corruption, and criminality, as far as serious and organized crime is concerned. So maybe we all have a shared interest in making sure that the revenue leakages are plugged. Having said that, of what use really would all of this amount to when the presidency directly controls so much money? I mean, I can understand that we want to say that the presidency or the Office of Government Machinery has other strategic, should I say, oversight over free SHS and all of that. But question being asked, why in this day and age, if you compare, by the way, other African countries also have similar officers that are the presidency anyway. Let's take a critical look at the budgets of 3 African countries and how much the presidency controls, and then compare that with their relative GDPs. If we take Kenya, for instance, this year, Kenya's GDP is $107 billion. The presidency controlled directly $221 million. Nigeria, whose GDP is almost $480 billion, the presidency directly controls $357 million. Ghana, whose GDP is just $70 billion, the presidency controls $470 million. Well, by the way, while we were doing all of this, my good friend and Vice President Bryce Simmons dug up this data. And so you ask yourself, yes, we can say that the presidency controls or oversees certain institutions, but the question really is, should the presidency be the hub for most of these, what I call non-strategic additions to the Politburo? Look at what's Maslog doing under the presidency when we have the Ghana Enterprise Agency all sharing money in the name of loans, right? I mean, there are a number of institutions that can be birthed or handled by the various ministries. See, the problem is not the fact that because they may be strategic, they should be controlled at the presidency. The problem is that once they are controlled at the presidency has free reign on how these funds are utilized. So that's what we need to address.
Okay.
So for me, I think, having said that, we are all making contributions in one way or the other. I don't think you knew that we were doing a study on plugging loopholes, and we've not made it public until now because of the nature of what we are doing. We are rather engaged with the various sector tests, but the report will be out shortly. But I still shudder to think that we can do all of this plugging, and at the same time, of what use is it when the government wakes up one day and says, I'm going to do another program that will see some people employed, but then that 5-6 years down the line, you don't seem to see the value that it has added to the economy, and those employed are on the street asking for their allowances. I think these questions ought to be asked and asked prudently.
Thank you very much, Franklin. Then let me come in, Toma, on you. I'll give you 5 minutes just to where the wiggle room comes for the government. Because, like I said, e-levy, I don't see it happening anytime soon. Property rates, they are dilly-dallying with it. Exemptions bill, dilly-dallying with it. Benchmark, dilly-dallying with it. Cutting costs, we don't know.
Well, now the issue is that, as you started by saying that e-levies that you can't see happening now.
Unless some form of consensus is reached in Parliament.
Yeah, that situation has to change. Look, I am against the e-levy, right? I agree with what Prof says about how they should implement
the design.
Yeah, the design. However, this thing is this. You cannot introduce property taxes overnight. You can't get the tax exemptions bill done overnight, right? You can't bring the informal sector, including the ones the profits talk about who earn large money. You can't bring them into the tax net overnight, right? And we need the money now to show international creditors that we are talking about fiscal consolidation, which is the reason why that's what the E-Levy is all about. It's not about creating jobs for people and these are all these things that the minister is talking about. The issue is that we need to show the international bondholders that we are serious about fiscal consolidation, so we can get access, we can get back to access to international capital markets. That's the truth of the matter. So I believe that they should find a resolution, face the realities, all right, and find a resolution and bring in as a stopgap measure for now. Maybe put a sunset clause on it. 1-2 years. While they are putting in place the modalities for property taxes, get the tax exemption bill passed, bring in the informal sector, all the people who are not paying income taxes, bring them in, and and achieve a tax to GDP ratio over 20%, like our peer countries have achieved. All right. Until then, I think we should go with the E-Levy. Look, let's face it. Government has been flying a kite about this kind of Momo tax every year since 2017. Every year, one minister or the other flies the kite. Then the people arrange stakeholders forum. I remember one Bernard Avile himself was the moderator a couple of years ago, and everybody resoundingly said no. And government saw with them the reasons why and how it had gone wrong in East Africa and that, and pulled back. What has changed now? The only thing that has changed is government's fiscal position. It has got tighter, which is why they have now come. I mean, they themselves know it's not the right thing to do. But the fiscal situation requires it. So as a short term, as a stopgap measure, it's something we can do immediately that will give us money that will assuage the fears
of our friends abroad.
Exactly. And the fact that I keep saying that, look, yes, this E-Levy would be inconvenient for a lot of people. But even from the short term, not having the support of the international financial community would have even worse effects on Ghana than paying the 1.5% that now being proposed for the E-Levy. So we are caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. All right? And I think if you say the E-Levy is the deep blue sea, I think I would prefer to be in the sea than sitting down with the devil. Okay. So I think we should accept it.
Dr. Edo, you also have 5 minutes.
Yes, thank you.
Where do we find the money? Where do we go?
No, I think, first of all, the government must send a positive signal. Send a positive signal to get the support of the citizenry. Whatever they are asking you to do, just try and do something. Stop, maybe cut the V8s, cut the travels. Just send some signal. We are not even talking about the significance of the money, but the gesture, the signal that you are sending. That's number one. And again, I support Thomas. The international credit rating agencies have downgraded us because of the purported government's inability of the fiscal consolidation path. And so what do we have to do now? Let's again send signal to the international community that we can generate resources domestically. What can be done today, tomorrow, and next week? Pass the E-Levy. Let government incorporate all the suggestions and pass the E-Levy. Then they can have access to the international capital market to finance the expenditure. After which, I know it's a short-term measure. After that, we shouldn't end there. We should come back home, mobilize resources domestically from other sources that we have talked about, and then
The government must also, moving forward, do a CV of every policy. It shouldn't be just go sleep, wake up and say, I want to do this. No, we have examples from the luxury tax and all those taxes. Let us do a proper analysis of every policy, and then we can go forward. So let's pass the E-Levy. Government have access to the capital market, get the loan, finance the expenditure in the short term, and then we can mobilize resources domestically in the medium to long term. By the way, I want to greet and thank Professor Ibo Texan for allowing me to share the same platform with him. Thank you.
A student and a teacher who are both now teachers. Prof, final word for you.
Yeah,
my question still stands. Where's the hope? Because I brought you here to give us hope, but I don't see it.
There's hope. There's hope. I mean, I'm not one of those who think that it's all lost for Ghana. I have very positive confidence that we'll ride the storm. I mean, if you take our exchange rate depreciation, for instance, I mean, we've had the first 2 months of almost every year, 2013, 2014, 2015, 2017, where we've had a spike in our depreciation because those what do you call multinational companies are repatriating their profits around this time. Mm-hmm. The Chinese New Year is closing. Our importers need to go and close their balance. You remember that happened in 2014, and then the central bank panicked with those obnoxious policies that even led us into more trouble. So we are going to ride a storm. Inflation will tone down. I'm not one of those who think that Ghana is
a lost cause.
No, it's not. Absolutely not. There are a lot of things we are doing right now that will take time for us to see the benefits of that. Like I said to you, the 1D, 1F, the sort of reforms that are happening to the business processes, government becoming more efficient in delivery of its services. These are the sort of things that we need to attract FDI into the economy. If you forgot that under the CARES of Atapa program, we have the support to light manufacturing, which is key for us because that is why we have comparative advantage now. Because of the increase in the outturn from the senior secondary school, those are the sort of labor force that you need for light manufacturing. So if we are going to get FDI to come to this country to begin to take advantage of the policies that are being in place to support our light manufacturing industry, I'm very certain that in the future we are going to be producing and exporting some of these light manufacturers to other African countries. So there are a lot of things that are being put in place now. Yes, we have fiscal challenges. We have to go beyond it. And like Ebisa Kodia said, I think that the governments and the minority and the majority have to come to a realization that this is about the bigger Ghana, not about their political parties. If we can come up with a rate that Ghanaians will accept, let us start with that rate. Let us see how much revenue we raise. But the government should show commitment to that fiscal consolidation on the expenditure side as well. Because the Ghanaians will be willing to pay if they can see you doing something about what is going on now. And so it's important that we get the two sides to agree. Because the impasse that is happening in Parliament is also giving signals on the international credit market that we might not be able to meet our fiscal consolidation effort. And that is why the downgrade is happening. We can do something about it. Let's just look at the bigger picture. Because not until COVID hit, Ghana was on the right track. There was no doubt about it. So let us see how best we can recover our economy back to where it was before COVID hit and begin to make those reforms to our structural bottlenecks. That is making Ghana, every time when there's an external factor, we are shaking. We need to build that solid structural reforms to be an economy that is resilient to some of these external factors. But not until we build that, we are always going to be shaken by these external factors that we have no control about. But I believe that Ghana will ride the storm. We shouldn't panic at all. We don't need to go to IMF because you know what? I thought that IMF was the last thing that we need to talk about. I mean, it's just small fiscal challenges and people are saying, go to IMF. No. When we go there, they are going to come. We are going to give them homegrown solutions that will look more like austere measures. And that is not what we need now. Economy that is recovering from COVID, we need to be more expansionary in our outlook, but efficient expansion to generate employment and grow the economy to reduce our debt to GDP ratio.
All right, then thank you very much.
Just 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Another thing we need to do very quickly is to get new oil fields under development. if you track Ghana's records at the international capital market, it coincides with oil
the findings of oil discovery.
Since Jubilee in 2007, since 10 in 2013. Then the increase in amounts we've been taking was at the Sankofa thing. And each time we go with the road shows and say that the oil will give us the money to pay. And now suddenly we have the latest 2 oil fields we discovered. No plan of development, no development going on. So that would also assuage the fears of our foreign creditors. If they see that fields are being developed, they will give us money.
All right, thank you very much. Let me just take a couple of messages. This one says, we find ourselves where we are as a nation because successive governments have failed to tackle the real issues facing the country with the right approach because of the political price they are afraid to pay, which is losing the next election. Because of this, they always side dress issues. The cascading effect is what the country is experiencing now. This is from Emmanuel Taino. This one says, all these price hikes that have been bestowed upon us and economic hardships that we have to struggle with, all that is going to do is to brew more criminals, because what is left to share amongst us is it to take all that we have now is to take from others so that we can get something to eat. This is a very upset K from Accra. This one, Yao says, look, our economy has been like this since the Brits left our shores. We are just unable to manage our affairs. And this one's set off from East Legon also says, this presidential budget compared to GDP growth is bad. Currency is also very bad. We'll take a break. When we return, Angel Carbonu is here, Kofi Asare is here. We'll discuss education. Thank you very much for staying with the big issue on City TV and also on City 973. Moving into education now, because that has also been under the scope. Strikes, UTAG, unrelenting. And also this week, the education conversation at the pre-tertiary level has also come up. We had been discussing food supplies. Parents had been complaining. Education Ministry was saying we're going to do something about it. But just the general state was also put under the limelight by NAGRAS, that's the National Association of Graduate Teachers, who say that one, government is failing to honor its financial commitment to the running of the Free Senior High School. They're not happy with the teaching environment. They're not happy with certain actions that are being taken by the Ghana Education Service and the ministry. They want a reversal of some of the policies that exist to what used to exist. There are those who are saying, well, Nagas, perhaps you are old-fashioned, you don't want to get along with modern practices and whatnot. Angel Carbonu is here. He's also spoken about the localized procurement. Angel, listening to you in the middle of the week, I asked myself, is everything okay in education at the pre-tertiary level? Because basically everything, you touched everything, and there seems to be a problem with everything.
Yeah. Yes. You know, I have a representative in almost all schools. Mm-hmm. So it is very easy to get feedback on specific issues. Some of the challenges are just local challenges that need local solutions. So maybe we don't trumpet those when we have press conferences. But very huge issues. And unfortunately, when we raised these issues on Thursday, the Deputy Minister for Education, Reverend Fojo, just came and used a Jojo Walakot approach to respond to some of
Angel, what is Jojo Walakot?
Oh man, I mean, if you are a goalkeeper who knows you are not capable of keeping our post and you accept it and go and mess up, you know. So the Deputy Minister just used a Jojo Walakot approach to just come on radio and say that all that I was saying at the press conference was to be singing from the hymn book of the NDC. Now, if this is...
That's what he said?
That's what he said.
Are you quoting him or you're paraphrasing him?
No, I'm quoting him. That all that I said at my press... That was the minister's response to the challenges the Deputy Minister, let me be specific, the Deputy Minister's response to the challenges that we have raised at a press conference that we were just singing from the hymn book of the NDC. That tells you the level of solution you will be expecting to the myriad of issues that we have raised. And if you don't mind, I can just quickly raise some of them point by point. You recall just last week, Charles held a meeting in Kumasi. And you know, Charles is not an organization like NAGRAT that comes out regularly. Charles is not an organization like NAGRAT that comes out regularly. But for Charles to hold a meeting in Kumasi and come to the public to bring out the challenges that they are facing and calling on government to even fix things like furniture is an indication of some of the challenges that we are having in our schools. And this is where the problem is coming from. If you recall, my brother, you and I were in this studio about some 4 years ago when it looked as if NAGRAT was critiquing the survival of the free senior high school. And we said that we welcome the free senior high school, but we are apprehensive in its sustainability because government does not have the history in keeping pace with its public financial obligations. Historically, from Kwame Nkrumah's days to Nana Akufo-Addo days, government do not have that history of keeping pace to its financial obligations to public institutions. Therefore, we had the opinion that let us identify those who are actually and critically financially challenged and create a separate bursary system for them. So that those who are capable of paying helps government to free up resources that can be plowed back into education. And come and see the descriptions some of us had from some people from the public, calling us names, calling us giving us all sorts of descriptions. Today,
you feel vindicated.
In fact, I feel very absolved. We used to sing some song when we were in school.
Hey, Angel.
You know, that is what is happening. And the problem is beginning to fester. And if we all don't put aside our egos and come to the table, media men, I listen to you and Bernard. You are very well versed with the information. And I'm very happy when people are discussing, but you are too concentrated on Swedro Senior High School, please.
We'll move to your end.
We'll move to my end. Pope Jones. You know, when you are discussing these issues, the facts that you bring out, the challenges of the number of students per headmaster and so on and so forth. As we speak, prepaid, you know, there was this write-up to school some years ago that schools should move on to prepaid.
Okay.
Those were the days that parents were paying school fees.
Yeah.
Now government is taking over that payment. So the schools that are on prepaid, they are supposed to pre-finance for government to reimburse. The problem is that when government reimbursement delays, it means that they don't have the money to even buy the prepaid. And we were all in boarding schools. When light goes off on Friday night, what happens? And that is even number one. Money for recurrent expenditure is been in arrears. So where do you expect the headmaster or the headmistress to mobilize funds to be able to satisfy needs of recurrent?
But why is it easier for NAGRAT to speak than CHAS?
No, CHAS is not a trades union.
Okay.
I get it. Members of CHAS are part of Ghana Education Service Administration.
Oh, okay.
And when they remove a headmaster and it had happened before. A headmaster was removed. Then I went to the Director General with all the anger, and the Director General said, have I taken out his salary? I said, no. Have I reduced his rank? No. He was a teacher and I thought that he should have a schedule as headmaster. Now I've reversed his schedule. They will incapacitate you with some of these technical arguments. And everybody knows that when you are moved as a headmaster back to the classroom, you have been demoted. They will say, yes, but your salary is intact. Your rank is intact. So what is your argument? You can't go to court and win a case like this. And the members of CHAS are well aware. They will just transfer you to an obscure office for you to hibernate there till you go on retirement. I mean, these are subtle ways of keeping them in check.
Let me ask this. The situation, the scenario that you described, and Kofi, just give me 2 seconds, I'll get to you. There's those who've said, look, perhaps the GES and the Education Ministry are trying to align themselves with modern practices of administration. Hold on, let me finish my question. Procurement used to be in the hands of headmasters. It's been taken out. It's been centralized, perhaps because there was significant corruption in the process. You cannot deny that. And so processes are being put in place to make sure that you cannot remove the corruption, but you can significantly reduce it by aligning it.
Right.
So then you also have the disciplinary measures that you spoke about. Why is NAGRAT not giving these new arrangements a chance, at least?
Okay. I wish Professor and Tuma were here. I'm not an economist, but the little economics that I've read indicate that the propensity for corruption is higher in a centralized system of administration than a decentralized system of administration. As we speak, you see, it is the outcomes that determines the validity of the process. And if the outcomes are not showing positive results, then we have a difficulty to contend with the current practice. The current practice is a situation where government gives the money to buffer stock, for buffer stock to go gather the food items and move to distribute to the schools. As we speak, buffer stock itself is in arrears because they've not been able to pay some of the suppliers.
350 million.
Yes, buffer stock itself. Number two,
but wait, we were told buffer stock were given some money in December, 164 million.
They are currently they are in arrears up to 350 million.
Okay.
Right. So when buffer stock is in this situation, its ability to even gather on time and its efficiency in distributing on time becomes compromised. The second thing is that when you bring Presec Gari, the population of students in Presec is about 4,000. The population of students in St. Mary's is about 1,000. So the amount of Gari that you need to take to Presec is totally different from the amount of Gari you take to St. Mary's.
That's the Kolebus St. Mary's.
That's the Kolebus St. Mary's.
Not Takra.
No, not Takra. No, that one is a different St. Mary's. They have their own characteristics. And boys' schools always have their own thing. No, so you have a situation where looking at this, sometimes buffer stock gets it wrong because they gather the food item in bulk. So you have a situation where they oversupply one item. So now you have headmasters and headmistresses negotiating among themselves to do trade-offs.
Who has more of what?
Who has more of what? So you see, when you don't critically go into the system, you will not know that these challenges exist. And we are saying that we need to sit down and review the buffer. You see, but why do we believe that when the supplies were in the hands of the headmasters, there was much corruption? Where are we getting that from? What evidence can show that the headmasters, even in those days with the meager school fees the students were paying, were not able to feed the students? Who is concluding that? And why are we concluding that? They should bring evidence that there was wanton corruption. You know, but what we are saying is that we have gone past the argument where we call for a critical look at the free senior high school were pushed aside politically. Now government says, I'm ready to pay. Please provide the resources adequately and timeously. Because when you don't, and even when you go to basic schools, the capitation grant is in arrears for 2 terms. In the basic schools. And this is the capitation grant the headmaster or headmaster uses to repair the windows, the doors, furniture, buy chalk, buy dusters, run the school.
So effectively you are saying the environment for education is wrong.
No, absolutely. It is
you
not,
can't teach.
It is not. We are doing our best in the circumstances, but it is not enticing. Look, there is a school in Medina. We call it number 1 cluster of schools. Their septic tank got filled up. Because there's no money, it was overflowing into the neighboring community. The headmaster dare not mobilize parents to say, come and contribute for us to empty the septic tank. until the money comes from central government. I'm saying that let us be bold and confront the issues and speak to it as it is. That the system that we are running is not working.
Hold on for me. I will get back to you on a couple more specifics. Kofi, Asari, you are a watcher with Education Watch in the space.
They are the watchers.
What did you make of the points that were made by Angel? And I was a bit disturbed hearing him at that presser describe the prevailing situation. You've been going around. You haven't told us this, Kofi.
Well, good morning to your viewers and then listeners. And this business of watching education is pretty difficult. I'm being honest with you. It is not possible to share a contrary opinion, let alone criticize the government policy, without being tagged. And when you get close to the Free Senior High School, then you are doomed. You can't talk about it. You know, immediately you share a contrary opinion, you are in trouble. If it's a criticism, forget it. You are excluded, you are tagged. And last 2 weeks, I was at the UDS to give a paper on depoliticizing, to deliver a paper on depoliticizing education policy during that institution's Hamatan School. And in my submission, I said that we needed tolerance. The intolerance of politicians within the education sector is not helping the development and management of education.
But why are they so intolerant? What are they protecting?
I'm saying this before I come to the main point. You see, politicians alone cannot develop and implement education policy. You develop policies, enact policies, develop policy, and coordinate the implementation of same. But when it comes to the implementation, even the parent has a role. Yeah. So if your attitude towards the most minute or the least contrary opinion or criticism is intolerance and tagging, then virtually you scare everyone who has a role to play in the implementation process away. Then later that same person will go and sit somewhere and say that we need all hands on deck. Which hands do you need on deck? Which hands do you need on deck? So we should be very, very careful when we are being intolerant. I'm not too old in this education policy business, but at least I'm in my 20th year. So if I say the trend of intolerance is ascending, it means that I am saying something. Having worked with ministers and politicians, at least from Honorable Barredu of the Red Marriage time to date. And I'm saying that we are missing something called tolerance. Not everyone who will come and tell you everything is fine means well. And not everyone who will criticize you, look at your face and tell you, this thing you are doing, take your time. There is a history to this. Why wouldn't you do it this way? Do it this way. Consider this. That person is not challenging you. That person is not saying you don't know anything. That person is not saying that you don't have the mandate to rule. That person is not saying that he knows better than you. But that person is simply saying that, listen, education management is simply political authority coming to the education ministry and enacting policies, okay, that will lead to the delivery of quality education and quality learning outcomes. But within the process, there is a system. The GES responsible for managing pre-tertiary. There are agencies, some of them are regulatory, some of them are autonomous bodies, etc., who are supposed to ensure that quality assurance is enhanced. Everybody has a role to play. But when you are managing this system, what you have to do is to first listen to the system. You cannot succeed in managing education in Ghana if you don't listen to the system, but rather believe that you are only going to speak to the system. Instructions, do this, do this. No, that is not how to manage education. Because you alone cannot do anything. you must move with the system. Your proposals for change, proposals for transformation, proposals for improvement must be imbibed into the system, must be accepted by the system, and must be owned by the system. And I said the system includes the civil service, the public service, the beneficiaries of education, the pupils, the parents, etc. So don't speak to the system. Don't be commanding the system. Listen to the system. If we do this, this intolerance will end. But I'm sorry, a lot of our leaders are not ready to listen. That is why it gets to the point where someone is saying, it shouldn't have been so. Because some of these things were and are always foreseeable. Now I'm coming to the issues he raised. For me, the only peculiar issue he raised, which I'm not aware of, was the issue of is it intervention or the... Application. No, I'm talking about the appointment of headmasters. So the issue of the intervention or the intrusion, if you like, of the Ministry of Education in the appointment of head teachers. For me, that was the only new thing. We spent the whole of January and February canvassing 15 districts, reviewing the education strategic plan and then education sector medium-term development plan. So the only thing, everything he said is well known, but we are here to start engagement, but we are we are to start engagement on the report. But what struck me was the involvement of the MOE. It struck me because already we have received several, and we have observed too many instances of the executive at the ministry doing the work of the public service or the civil service. And I'll say it again. I said it yesterday, and then people had problems with me. People called me, people called me from government, made all, yes. But and people also sent me messages. I'm not going to mention anyone's name here. But the point I want to make is that it is an observation I have made since 2008 or 2007. Immediately, politicians enter the Ministry of Education. Since that year, they start by appointing special assistants, presidential staff. Now we have some of the presidential staffer. For example, the free senior coordinator is a presidential staffer. Okay, so they bring in the special assistant, special advisors to come and provide what I believe is specialized knowledge that may not exist, or expertise that may not exist within the public or civil service. That's fine. We all work together. But that system has now gotten to the point where it's been abused. Because you see that many a times these consultants, they are all consultants. I call them consultants because they are paid differently. They are consultants. These consultants end up running or being used to run parallel systems in some of these ministries. And it's not only the Ministry of Education. One unit, for instance, is the Public Relations Directorate. If I go to all the ministries, they are headed by politicians, quote-unquote party boys.
Then they're the technocrats.
Yes. No, the technocrats, they're not there. And everyone there is appointed from the communication team, many a times. They are appointed by politicians, brought in there. They are not public servants, so they are paid as consultants. And they work in the PR department. The last time, in the education ministry, for instance, and I read this issue first in 2005. The last time I saw a civil service PRO at the education ministry was when Mr. Krampa. He was a PR director. He had become so through the ranks. Since Mr. Krampa left in 2004, 2005, all those who have come after him have been politicians. When you do that, you politicize education. Because the information dissemination is politicized. What the parents hear, what everyone here, students hear, is what the PR communicates. So even when there are food shortages, the person says everything is okay. Because the person is there as a party communicator. The allegiance is not to education. The allegiance is to the party. And what worries me most is that when the minister who brought the person is leaving, they leave with them to another ministry. In the education ministry. the previous minister, Honorable Procurement, he had his press secretary. When he was going to the energy ministry, he took him along. And that's what happens in other ministries. So it's like coaching. You come for backroom staff. When you run the ministries like this, including the Ministry of Education, what happens is that you deny the civil servant of what we call the institutional memory, the institutional capacity that needs to be retained. We need to build strong institutions. When you do this, you are not building strong institutions. So such parallel systems being run. Some of the directors in some of the ministries, including the education ministry, you talk to them and they don't know what's going on. They rather ask you, this thing, we heard it at the press conference when the minister announced it. Say, brother, say, yes, true. You understand? So people, there are secretariats there that are not the regular civil service implementing or delivering education. We have raised issue during in 2020, ahead of the campaign. We told government, this free senior high school policy is a good policy. The impact, at least at the intermediate level, has shown that the policy was well intended. Okay. But it is time for us to migrate this policy into the regular GES. Because GES is the one mandated to deliver education service. GES has been managing secondary education in this country for 50 years. How many times did we discuss for this? So, have a framework to migrate the free senior high schools management from under the Ministry of Education to GES. And let the secondary education division of GES handle this thing. So that tomorrow, when this government is not there, and another government comes, we would have mainstreamed this beautiful program into institution. Immediately you say this, hey, what I say? So you see, the Ministry of Education, which was set up to be a policy formulator and a policy coordinator, is now becoming gradually a net implementer of policy. Now, if the Ministry of Education implements, who will supervise? Who? There's a reason why the NLC law, which established the ministry, indicated that the ministry is responsible for policy formulation. Because when you formulate policies, then the GES, your implementing arm, implements the policies. So that when it comes to direction, supervision, quality assurance, compliance, the ministry provides that. But if the ministry itself is now doing the implementation, who will provide that guidance, direction? Who? Civil society organizations? They won't even give information for you to go into that. So when we raise these issues, we raise them in good faith.
Okay.
And we encourage the minister and his team to listen to us with the objective of Ghana and not just a 4-year or 8-year tenure of a political administration. We raise them in good faith that if you want the legacy that you are leaving behind to be left behind properly, so-called, and the legacy stays, you must be interested in building an institution that will adopt, not just adapt, but adopt your free senior high school and any other program you are doing beyond your tenure. That is when it becomes a legacy. That is what I want to talk about, the growing level of intolerance, okay, and then the interference of the ministry in some core functions of the Ghana education
Hold
service.
on there for me, and I will get to UTAG in about 10 minutes to discuss what their issue is, but I'm staying with Angel for now. And he spoke about GS, which is a point you raised quite strongly, because you are a firm believer in the Ghana Education Service's ability to do its work, and your organization feels they are being hindered.
Yes. And
GS should speak for itself.
Well, Kofi hit the nail right on it. This is not one government problem. When Mr. Chega was Director General of the Ghana Education Service, he came in conflict with a deputy minister on the issue as to who the employer was. That was when we were formulating the Ghana Education Service Occupational Pension Scheme, where the ministry felt that now they are the employer, so they should send somebody to represent. And then the Director General said, no, I am the employer. Based on that, Mr. Chega was transferred as a Director General to Curriculum.
Naka.
Wow.
By the government.
So you see why they won't talk.
So that's where he retired. From Director General of Ghana Education
To
Service
Naka.
to Naka.
That Naka was even struggling to get an office.
They had not even been informed properly. So you see that, like Kofi said, believe in the professionals. And I'm not saying that when like he said, supervise. When the professional is failing, and the interesting thing about the Ghana Education Service now is that we are having a lot more teachers upgrading themselves in areas of human resource, in areas of administration,
Even law.
in areas of law, and so on and so forth. Yet they are still in the Ghana Education Service and they are rising in rank. So all that you have to do as a ministry, set your standards and make sure that people abide by the standards. Those who fall outside your standard expectation, you kick out. And there should be demonstrable evidence that the people have really not lived up to their expectations. That's all it is. Because you see, one problem of supervision is that you cannot bring a junior officer or a non-professional to come and supervise my work. Because I believe that I'm a professional educationist. And when you come to the school to supervise my work, there are questions I'll put to you. And if you are not able to answer me, I tell you, knowing who I am, you are not going to supervise me. And that is how it works in every professional establishment. You know, for example, the appointment of heads of schools.
Yes. You have issues with an advertisement you saw.
Yes, I will send you that advertisement. It was
Why are you worried? These are new schools that
You
are
see-
coming up. What is your problem?
You see, when we talk about STEM education, you know, we started...
You're a science teacher, right?
No. I'm a social studies, geography teacher. Okay. Science? No.
But go on.
I'm not like Kofi who knows so
I
much.
bet
You know, in the Ghana Education Service, you need to have risen to the level of deputy director. If we feel it is too high, we can all sit down around the table and pick the best rank. You should have been a head of department or maybe a counselor in the school. You should have taught for X number of years. Then you apply and go for interview. When you are going for your interview, you send your write-up as to how you are going to improve institution when you are given the opportunity. So we don't take inexperienced people. So you can have your PhD. If you are inexperienced, you are not qualified to head a school. We have even advocated as unions that the Ministry of Education, the Ghana Education Service, should establish some leadership training institution for workers of Ghana Education Service, for them to qualify in that leadership training institution, to qualify them to be heads of schools. If they feel that we are deficient in the administration and managing of this, we say we will support that wholeheartedly. But when you establish, and when we talk about STEM education, if you recall, you know, we're talking about this integrated science thing, physics, chemistry, biology, coming together in one single subject, so that the Ghanaian child will be equipped with some level of minimum science knowledge, because that is where the world is going. It has moved from that level to STEM, where we want as many children as possible to move from the arts into the sciences and have an orientation of engineering, technology, and science. If you recall, some time ago, PRESEC was being described as science college. That's why they built those big buildings. Today, they are taking advantage over all of us. But it was still a a secondary school under Ghana Education Service. The world is moving from the liberal arts to the sciences. So it's a good thing that the government is come up with STEM senior high schools. But the fact that they are STEM senior high school does not mean that they will do only science. They'll still be doing their English language. They'll still be doing their social studies and all the other required subjects. But the emphasis will be on science. There are some of us who could have been very good science students, but maybe we didn't get the motivation. Those schools are going to give the students that level of motivation. There are some people who were not too good in maths and science, but they are good in skills and all that. So the concept is good. We don't have a problem with the concept. But do not take advantage of the concept and start appointing people without going through the appointing process. When it starts like that, a time will come where now you will see that appointment will now be moving into other areas. And when that happens, it breaks the chain of seniority, it breaks the chain of procedure, and then we have a very amorphous system of appointing people into headship. That is exactly what we're talking about. So, and I will send you the advertisement. And the advertisement did not give the other conditions that will qualify people. The only condition was that you should have been a degree from the, you should have been a master's holder in education.
So your assumption is that they are hiring from, they're looking for people from outside the existing structure who can apply.
Yes. So we are saying that go back to the existing structure.
But why is it a bad idea? These are...
No, it is not a question of bad. If that be the case, then why am I here? I could have also been a headmaster some time ago. And then...
So your point is, these are not private schools.
No, these are government schools.
So don't bring a different line to them.
A different line. They are not private schools. These are government schools. The teachers employed in those schools are like you.
They'll come from you.
Yeah, they'll come. They are our members. So we don't do things like that. And when I say this, I'm being talked about as singing from NDC hymn book. That's why I say it was a Jojo Wallacott approach to answering a real situation.
What about this deletion of payroll?
Right. You see, when the CSOs, we used to call them circuit supervisors. When you are a teacher and you are not present at the time of validation, you are not validated. So once you are not validated, that month you will not receive salary. And controller is such that when he does not get another command to reverse, it continues. The second one is when a district director feels that this teacher so and so, they can write to controller, and controller can stop your salary. Even heads could write to controller for your salary to stop. And we are saying that in labor practice, stopping a worker's salary will have to happen when the fault or the infraction is a very grievous one. It is easy to stop, but it is very difficult to reinstate. Because we have not been able to get our technologies right. And controller itself will tell you, when you bring for them to stop, they'll stop one time. But make sure that there's a good reason for which you are bringing it for us to stop. Because when you say we should reinstate, the system is not that simple. So we've had a situation where a senior high school wrote a letter for 6 teachers to have their salaries stopped. The headmistress was a new head, so she thought by a simple letter they'll reinstate. And she was writing the letters for 5-6 months. Then the teachers started agitating. I had to go to controller personally to help rectify that situation. And how many times can a union leader make himself present in controller? So we are saying that take the code of conduct and the condition of service. There are sanctions attached to offenses, and there are procedure that you follow in sanctioning a teacher who have violated aspects of his or her establishment. The easy way of just writing letters to controller to stop salaries should be the last resort and ought to come from the employer, in this case, the Director General of the Ghana Education Service. Because indeed, some of these will have written for reinstatement. I have a teacher in Sumus Secondary Technical School. For the past 19 months, he has been without salary. We have pursued this at the IPPD office at the Ghana Education Service. They are having difficulty in reinstating this teacher because they have gone across a fiscal year. How can you subject your brother or a sister in this dire economic environment to such a treatment? So if next 2 weeks you hear that NAGRAT is on strike to ensure that all those who have been removed from the payroll are reinstated, you don't have to be surprised.
But you have given the government 2 weeks.
Yeah, they should do the needful.
What do you want? Some of these problems will not take 2 weeks to solve.
Oh, reinstate.
They cannot pay buffer stock in 2 weeks. They cannot.
Yeah, but then what happens? Look, someone sent me a text message.
It's not asking government to pay for talk.
No, for us, we said supply food.
They are not saying
yes.
For supply the food to the schools.
Supply food.
I just had a text message indicating in the morning they took porridge, they took some gari in the evening. Well, when you are on break, I'll just look for it. I'll let you read it yourself. You know, and from a good school too.
And what they're eating with porridge and
what? Yes. You know,
porridge without bread.
I'll get it when we get home. So the issue is this, that the system that we are running is not helping, and yet people don't want us to sit down and review. You know, the moment they agree to sit down and review will be an admission of failure, and we are not interested in indicating that anyone is failed. We are interested in finding solutions. For example, we raised the issue of lessee notes.
Yes.
In this day and age, people still believe that people should take pen and paper and write lessee notes in a certain ancient, antique, medieval format, when you can easily do your lessee note through technology. So on an issue, we are not saying people should not prepare. We support preparation, but times have changed. What we should now be having is updated lessee notes. If the definition of demand and supply, like my professor in Kivas, Baston will say, demand is desire backed by ability to pay. If it is not changed, if I'm teaching that next year, it is already on my system. If I need to beef it up with certain new and recurrent examples, I do that. If you, the supervisor, wants to find out how I'm prepared to teach, give me your link. I'll send it to you. If you do not know how to use computer, it is not my fault. Go and learn. And give me your link, and I'll send it to you. Today, we are having IT-generated report sheets from even basic schools.
Yes.
But do you know how we fought for that? If you know how we fought for that thing. Now you can sit here and check how your child is performing. Mm-hmm. They cannot swerve you anymore like the way you did when you were in school. They can't do that to you because you can easily go on and find out the results of your child from the school. One professor from Methodist University told me that until you make IT a necessary function in operation, people will not be motivated to become IT compliant. So when we operationalize the use of IT in terms of communicating, interacting, everybody will be compelled to learn something out of it, because without that, you cannot survive. And when we say this, you come and tell us that we are singing from NDC hymn book. Honestly speaking, yesterday, Nagot had to boycott a meeting that the minister called.
Oh.
Because of the insult of the deputy minister. A union is organized a press conference. A union is identified a number of issues. Then you come on radio to say we are singing from the hymn book of a political party. And until he withdraws that statement and apologizes, we'll be taking series of actions.
Into Carbonu to the good Reverend in Team Fojo. Biggie should be right back. Welcome back to the big issue as we discuss education. Like I said, it's not just the pre-tertiary level that has problems. There's UTAG, who have been in a tussle with the government for 5 weeks now on a couple of topics. They've been engaging the government on salaries and conditions of service, and they simply feel that they are not getting what they are worth. Mediation does not seem to be working. NLC, courts back and forth. This week they ordered by a court, an Accra High Court, to suspend their strike. We haven't heard from UTAG, but we will hear from UTAG now because we've been joined by the president of the University of Ghana chapter of UTAG, Dr. Samuel Nkumban. Dr. Nkumban, good morning.
Good morning to viewers and listeners.
Thank you for joining us on the big issue today. You are normally in the studio today, you're hiding in the comfort of your car, but so far as we get you, we are fine with that.
Yes, unfortunately, I have to be in a funeral out of town, so I indicated to them I'll try as much as it's possible to be part of this because it's important.
Well, let's clap a couple of things. After the court ruling, we heard from UTAG who said they were going to discuss this with their legal team, and then once they received advice, they would then know what response to give to that. And then, surprise, surprise, we heard a statement from a parliamentarian that your strike had been suspended. Just give me an update. What is, as we on this Saturday, as you sit in your car at a funeral, what is UTAG's position on this matter? Well, at least from your side, what you understand.
Thank you very much. There were two issues before the court for a determination to be made. One of them, which was the one to have been filed earlier by NLC, had to do with the substance of whether or not our strike was legal or illegal. And the second was an injunction plea from the National Labour Commission for the strike to be suspended. And so on the day we were in court, it was my understanding from our side that the lawyers expected the substantive matter, which has to do with the legality or otherwise of our strike, to be heard. And if that determination was made, either for or against UTAG, then of course it would mean that the injunction plea would not have been necessary. The judge took alternate view of that, listening to rather the arguments for the case of injunction, and granted injunction to the Labour Commission as regards our action. Now, before we met with the Education Select Committee, we were awaiting the certified order of the court, which our legal team indicated would be what would detail the orders as the court requires of us. And so we were waiting for that, and then the legal team would be able to say that this is what the court requires of UTAG. And we were still at that point when we had to engage with the Parliamentary Select Committee. For UTAG, that engagement has been had. Of course, as a law-abiding body, two options available to UTAG would be to either suspend the strike as ordered by the court, or to make an appeal to the court in relation to staying execution of the injunction for us to have the substantive matter heard. And so we are yet to take that decision as to which way we go. But that is something that we are considering very strongly before the day elapses when we would possibly have faulted the law. At the committee meeting with Parliamentary Select Committee of Education, they sought to hear firsthand from both UTAG and from government what the issues are and the circumstances that have led us to be on this industrial action and so on and so forth. Both parties proffered the reasons for which we are where we are. The Parliamentary Select Committee, of course, appreciated the fact that our conditions of service were indeed deplorable, and they appealed to UTAG to reconsider its stance by way of having to consider calling off the industrial action and to engage with government. They also, of course, asked government to commit to ensuring that they would act in good faith this time around, should UTAG decide to call off the strike, and engage us more meaningfully in finding an amicable solution to the impasse. Well, of course, we made it very clear to the committee that it didn't lie in the power of the leadership that was present at that meeting to make that pronouncement or determination, and that we would hold an executive committee to brief the broader body. And of course, the executive committee members would in turn engage their various constituents on the campuses, and then we would make a pronouncement thereafter. And so a National Executive Committee meeting is scheduled for Monday, and thereafter we would be engaging our constituents on the various campuses and to be able to make a firm determination and pronouncement to the public.
So whilst these engagements are going on, you would be teaching?
Unfortunately, no. Unfortunately, no, because we are of a considered view that if the substantive matter which borders on the legality or otherwise of the strike doesn't happen, of course, if we were to call it off today and Tuesday the court rules that the strike was legal, then what happens? And so we are looking at those dynamics and taking the necessary legal steps to ensure that we do not falter with the law, as well as maintain our position in terms of pressing home the need for better conditions of service for UTAG members.
Let me stay off the court case a bit and ask you this. Has the relationship between UTAG and the NLC broken down?
Well, we would say so because NLC is supposed to be an arbiter, a neutral one at that. And as we speak, UTAG and NLC are parties in a dispute, which is in court. And so it is difficult for UTAG to say that we are calling off a strike and going to engage with who? Government, who is not party to the lawsuits. And so it's become a difficult matter in terms of negotiating or navigating around the National Labour Commission, which essentially by provision is supposed to be a neutral arbiter. Under the circumstances, it has become a party in dispute with UTAG. And we find that quite challenging. And unfortunately so, because it looks like that is the nature of the labor law, which doesn't make too much common sense in as far as we are concerned.
Now, with regards to the government, and I will wrap up the conversation so that you can go back to what you're doing. Almost 6 weeks of strike suggests a certain level of, I don't know if resoluteness is a good word. How far are you willing to go to see this through?
Well, I mean, it's been a very clear case from general membership that until our demands are met, the communique that issued the industrial action said it was an indefinite action. The expectation, of course, is also that there have been a series of interventions by some stakeholders in education, particularly in recent times, the Parliamentary Select Committee. And so it is our hope, and we were hoping that given that we had come to a certain baseline for which government should respond, the expectation was that government would make an offer. Government is of the opinion that whilst we are on strike, to engage us would mean that they are negotiating under duress. On the flip side, UTAG is of the opinion that once we are in court with the National Labour Commission, and we want to see finality of the matter determined by the courts, to call off the strike is also not in the best interest of UTAG's position. And that is the stalemate we find ourselves engaged with.
Okay. Dr. Kumban, thank you very much. Have a good weekend. He is the University of Ghana chapter of UTAG president, and outlining clearly what their position is. Looks like, Kofi, on this particular matter, we're in for the long haul, because for the casual observer, that court ruling would have meant, students can heave a sigh of relief. But if you look at the processes he has outlined that they have to go through, it could take 2 weeks to even complete their own internal engagements.
Yeah, well, that is that's not new. That's how NEC at UTAG don't take decisions on issues like that. They have to consult their constituents, and I think the court is aware, and Parliament is aware. So, consulting them to know whether they should, explore further legal avenues. Perhaps they want to appeal, stay execution. That's an option, or they should go back. So they have to consult, and it is procedural. I'm not too. It is not my job, to be explaining their procedures. But I wish this strike would have been over in the second week. Unfortunately, we are in week 6, and it means that if schools resume, let's say next week, hopefully, our lecturers will have to be doing Saturday lectures. That's the only way. They've lost more than 60 credit hours, and so it means that every week there has to be an extra day of tuition where students are going to do at least six hours.
That's a lot of stress on students.
For the remaining 10 weeks, because the semester is 16 weeks. The challenge is that the relationship between government and UTAG is not cordial. You understand? I'm not saying that there is animosity between them, but it's not cordial. The relationship between NLC and UTAG has no good faith. That one has no good faith.
That is hostile.
Because just when you pretended that you are negotiating with us at the back of us, at our backs, you quickly go to court and try to injunct the process. So what were we discussing? You understand? So I want to encourage the Ministry of Education to be interested in building bridges. We must build bridges at this time. We must repair the relationship and then ensure that it gets to the point where lecturers will be obliged to put in extra efforts and teach on Saturdays, to cover the 60 plus hours that have been lost as a result of the strike. It is in the interest of government to do that, because if the universities are not able to run the 16-week calendar, if they're not able to manage what should have been taught, written in terms of examination and also revised within the 16 weeks, and they have to extend the academic calendar, it will come with financial implications for government and also for the universities. Mm-hmm. And note that the universities run heavily on IGF nowadays. I was saying that the total IGF contribution to the budget today is about 15%. Out of the 15%, universities alone contribute 77% of the IGF. So immediately you extend the length of time students are spending in school without they paying extra utilities. Look, it has negative consequences on the university. If they have to manage the 16-year academic calendar within 10 weeks, 16-week academic calendar within 10 weeks, because we've lost 6 weeks, without compromising on quality, the lecturers will have to sacrifice. And that sacrifice will not come from a relationship where one feels that I have been let down or I have been shortchanged because I relied on the promise you promised me last year, and it has amounted to a detrimental reliance. So that relationship between the ministry and the UTAG will have to be repaired. I will say repaired because I won't pretend that it is all rosy. Repaired and improved so that they will take those initiatives. Apart from that, I see some people trying to politicize the strike thing. It's unfortunate. I don't see party politics playing any role in the strike. It's a national issue. The matter that took them to strike is a 2012 matter. It has transcended various regimes. If all the regimes played their part and there was acquiescence, we wouldn't have been discussing this issue. So the least I want to hear about, especially on media platforms, is people trying to score partisan points about the strike. There's nothing partisan about this point. If there's something partisan about this strike, then both parties did not play their role well. Because this issue, as I said, is a 2012 issue. It's 10 years old, and so let's bury this partisan angles, and then let's approach this issue holistically. I'll also be happy if, on the back of the court ruling, government can even begin negotiations with the lecturers. You understand? Because it is not.
But aren't they hindered by their legal constraints?
The court is not saying government shouldn't negotiate. The court is the substantive case in court hasn't been heard. This is just.
But they say you cannot negotiate whilst you are on strike, so you have to give up the strike.
When doctors are on strike, don't they negotiate? So to every rule, there's an exemption. Now that we are aware that this consultation thing is more or less a lead to lecturers returning to the classroom, because we don't think our lecturers are so lawless that when courts deliver judgment rulings, they would respect same. At least government can start something, so that we will have the assurance that there's something good going to happen. Finally, our parliament, the Parliament Select Committee on Education is a committee that we have been working with since 2004 or 5. I've worked with various select committees, and I believe in the commitment of the chair, Honorable Mankwesiama, to the cause of education development. He's very, very passionate about teacher deployment issues, about teacher accommodation issues, about rural education and all that. But I wasn't too happy when it took Parliament 6 weeks to meet UTAG. I know, yes, E-Levy, but I wasn't too happy. Because I thought that at a point it got to the level where there was mistrust between the NLC or the employer and then the UTAG. That was when we needed
a committee.
Parliament. Or even much earlier. The strike was declared on 10th January. I think that Parliament should have met UTAG before the end of January. Because we were starting an academic year already ravaged by COVID. The tertiary year should have started in September, and we're doing it in January. So immediately a strike came in to intervene and possibly disrupt this effort to try and gradually realign, bring back our academic year to the September. Immediately this thing emerged, I was expecting the select committee to have been much more, proactive than waiting for 6 weeks. So in future issues like that, of that nature, because it looks as if, it appears as if UTAG gave them much of a listening ear, that meeting was very progressive. It's on the basis of the progress made at that meeting that I believe that they should have intervened much earlier. And in future issues, not only agitation, but in future issues relating to the education sector, I will be happy if the select committee is more proactive and get more involved in some of these things than to assume that the executive will handle it.
Oh, all right. Franklin.
I'm just enjoying the conversation.
You cannot just enjoy the conversation.
Right. I think, look, the education sector should be one of the most, should I call it, we should focus attention there, because once a country gets its education issues wrong, all other things fall in disarray. I think anytime education issues are discussed, the tension, the disagreements are too vehement, and I think that we need to cool down. The education authorities must also understand the dynamics of the situation, and then let cooler heads prevail. I can only say that we seem to be all over the place with some of the reforms, but listening to my good friend Kofi Asari and Angel, I think, and the professor who spoke, I think there's some room for understanding the issues and then charting the common path. Too often, the infrequent nature of should I call it the managers, or the change in the management of education officers, basically has been our bane. And I think that we need to rein in some of these what I call offside goals we've been scoring, in order that we can fashion out an education system.
I see the football analogies alive and well this morning, from Jojo Walakot to offside goal from Franklin Kujo.
I think we need to do a lot more, and for me, I worry greatly that every now and then the attention that is needed at the top seems to be dissipated by some of these internecine squabbles over remuneration, emoluments, when the critical issues Kofi Asare talks about all the time, infrastructure. And look, we are talking about education today, and Kofi and his group have been saying time without number that we need to have our textbooks for some of our wards, and it's a real worry. So look, we need to just get our act together. I think the minister, but I suspect that there may be too many things happening that he needs to have some sort of control over. Yeah.
Thank you. And that brings me to the matter, Angel. I need to ask you this. It might be a bit hard for you, but does the organization or your group get the feeling that the minister is in control?
Well, I think the minister has a lot of desire to see a certain change and a certain approach. I think the challenge is how he is able to bring on
The system.
the stakeholders, bring on people with diverse. For example, I have been asking the question. I hear there is a reform committee.
Secretariat.
I have not met one person from that reform secretariat. I don't know the holistic agenda of the reform.
Wait. There's a reform
Secretariat.
and the NAGRAT has not met anybody
from the reform secretariat.
Okay.
I don't know what reform they are talking about, because in education you don't do spatial reforms. It should be, because you may have it right here, but if it is not in consonance with another state, you have the whole thing wrong. We all know the 1951 accelerated development education policy. We know the 1986 education policy. We know the Anamwa Mensa education review. So are we having an education reform? What is the education reform? What aspects of education are we reforming? Where is the document that myself, Kofi, and you can use as a standard of reference? How did you bring Ghanaians on board to come and understand the objectives and goals you are developing in that reform? Because like Kofi said, education is so interesting that even when parents are not in tandem with your policy can fail. When teachers are not in tandem with your policy, it may be a good policy, but it can fail. Society ought to be brought along. So I'm saying that if you are reforming education and there is a reform secretariat, and I've been hearing of this reform secretariat for the past 5 years, what document who is the chairman of the reform committee? Who have they consulted? Have they done any road shows? Have they done any piloting?
I find it intriguing. Like, there's one and
look,
Nagat is big enough.
Look,
so
you don't invite me, invite Kofi.
Me.
Right. The question is, you cannot cook something for me that I am not happy with. Look, the meeting we boycotted, we were going to meet curriculum and discuss very serious issues, and this textbook matters, and who would have come back. But for what the deputy minister said, we boycotted it. But we would have asked them that before we were having this number of subjects, tell us the new subjects that you have brought and the purpose for which you have brought them. Where are the materials for both teachers and students to use for the new subject and approaches? That some of them are just with new ways of teaching, new teaching strategies, new teaching methodologies, and so on and so forth. Where can the teacher go, apart from the orientation you've given to him or her, to be able to identify some of these new teaching approaches and new teaching strategies to enhance his wherewithal as far as teaching and learning are concerned? These are some of the things. So you see, I think we have to redefine engagement and consultation. Because when they finish what they want to do, and they invite you to a program to tell you this is what we want to do, tomorrow when you raise reference, they say they've consulted you. You have already finished with a document. You have invited me to the last program to announce the document to me. When I raised red flags, you say you have consulted me. How can that be consultation? I have to be part of the whole process from beginning and take my input. I'm not saying my input should be taken by all means. Take on board my input. Take on board other people's input. Let the inputs of people fashion out the document that is going to be the operation document. That is consultation. Not when you are coming to announce the program and I come and you take my attendance and I sign that I've attended the program. Then you come and flag my attendance at the last program to the media and say, Angel Kabonu was actually at the meeting and he was consulted.
My time is up. I won't consult you on that one. Thank you very much.
Let me quickly say that I also believe that the minister has good intentions. He is committed to improving the system. When people with dynamic and people with ideas, people who are dynamic, come to the ministry, it sounds refreshing because as young guys we believe that the system should change and change for the better. So I think his intentions are clear, his capabilities are clear. The approach is where it will take time for him to get used to. He's a man exposed to his experience is in the private sector. Yeah. His experience is in the private sector. When he was appointed, I had a discussion with someone in government. And then he asked me, "This is your man that every day you are clamoring for. Are you sure?" I said, "Oh, yes." I think his only challenge is that his only experience of public sector governance is what he experienced at Anapo. Okay, but let's hope he's able to build on that. So for me, the only issue I think he has is the approach. You understand? Because the approach in doing things in the private sector is absolutely different from the approach in doing things in the public sector. That is why your consultation is not his consultation. Even the way policies are conceived, the ideation of policy, the processes, they are different from private sector where you are an owner of a school and then the approach in developing policies may differ. So I think that he will get used to the system. But his ideas, his intentions are clear. He has to be tolerant and get used to the system. And I think that with that, he will succeed.
Thank you very much, Kofi Asare. And on that note, thank you as well for spending the past 4 hours with us on The Big Issue. My name is Godfrey Akoto Boafo. Have a good weekend, and I'll see you next weekend.